Okay, so now since we know what the problem is, we know that, we need to do something to fix it. So what we're going to do is that every time we run the application, doesn't matter if we are on the server or on the client, we are still running this as authenticated. But we're going to do an additional step. We're going to check if we are on the browser and we're going to do something. And if we are on the server, we're going to do something else. So if we are on the browser, we are still doing this. So the way we check, we get to check if we are on the browser or the server, we get access to process and we get access to browser. So on this one, we can check if we are on the browser. So if we are on the browser, this one is going to return true. If it's true, it means that we are safe to run this because we do have cookies. Now, if we are on the server, it's going to go back to this and we're going to create a different logic right here. So for now, just to make sure that we are on the correct path, I'm going to do we are on the browser. And the other one, of course, I'm going to do on the server. We are on the server. Very cool. I'm going to reload the application. And I'm going to, of course, we're going to get undefined. And that is cool. So if we go to we go to our project on the terminal, we are on the server. So remember that the first time it runs, it goes to the server, right? So if I go to a different place and then maybe go back, or maybe, just reload the same component, we are on the browser. So this code runs right here. That's why we are getting the true right now. So pretty cool. So now we have a way to run some code on the browser and run some code on the server only if we are on the server. Notice that this one is not running twice. Right, so very cool. So now, of course, this one, the first one, kind of works. Now the only thing we need to do is to fix the one at the bottom. And this one, it's a little bit, we need to do some work right here at on the server, because we don't have access to cookies. We have no way of asking in a more direct way to the application to enter to the cookies and get the values from here. So we need to get it from the request. There's no other way. So let me make this a little bit smaller, and I'm gonna go back to the console. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to access the request. When I reload the page, of course, a request, it's going to our application. And from within our application and from within the _.app, we do have access to the request. And everything happens on get initial props. Now remember that on the get initial props, we get access to the context. And on the context, we have access to the actual request. So every time that we run on the server, we can pass the information to is authenticated. So I'm going to go and say, okay, I want to run this function and I want to be passing the request that we have on inside context. So now this function that is authenticated will get the information of the request. If I do console log request, you're going to see the terminal just going nuts. So I'm going to reload the application. I'm going to reload it right here and notice that we are getting the request. And inside the request, we do have access to the cookies. Okay, so now in real life, and I'm talking about in the world, we do have libraries to get the cookies from a request on the server side. And they are really complete and real awesome. And they're so complete and so awesome that they suck. Right now, what we need to do is we need to do a simple operation. Just get the cookies from the request. That's it. And if I show you how to install the this modules, these libraries, and they are really complicated to use. They're really complicated. They're just weird. And since they are really complex and we need to do something simple, we're gonna do it manually. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna start doing manually. Don't worry, I'm gonna show you what we get on each step. So the only thing we know right now is that we get a request. All right. So I'm gonna create a variable called cooks and then list. And at the end of the day, we're gonna store our cookies inside here in an object notation so we can access them easily. Now I'm gonna create a variable called RHC. So this one is going to be for request, then headers. We're going to access the request. We're going to bring the headers, access the headers, And then we're going to bring the cookie. And notice that this is cookie, not cookies. So now if I do a console log of the RHC, we're going to see the cookies. So I'm going to reload the application, and I'm going to go right here and notice that we get the cookies. That's, correct. We get the expiration time, and we get our token. So now maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, that this one is a big string. It's a pretty big string. And they are split by, a semicolon, and then we have an equal. So these ones are not very useful for us. So what we need to do is we need to do some additional function to convert this into an object we can use later. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to do HRC. And if we do have something, we're going to do something. If not, we are not going to do anything. What do we want to do? Well, since this is a string, and the separation on the string between each key is a semicolon, I'm going to access the HRC or RHC. I'm going to split, and I'm going to use that semicolon. Then, of course, we're going to get an array-like splitted with semicolons. So then I'm going to run a for each. So I'm going to run a loop on this array. So on each one, of course, we're going to run a function. Now on each iteration, we will have access to each cookie. So now if I do console, then log, and I console log the cookie, we get pretty much the same, but now it's on a different way. On the first iteration, because we are on a for each, we get the first token. And on the second iteration, we get the second token. Now notice that there is a space, and right here, there is a space. So we can still not use this because it's not usable. So I'm gonna create a const, and I'm gonna call it a section or sections, whatever. And this one is gonna be equal to this cookie we have right here. And I'm going to split it by the equal. Why am I splitting? Notice that right here we have an equal sign. And this, again, this is something that we need to remove. So I'm splitting and creating an array just with that. All right, just removing the equal sign. Then what I need to do, since we have a kind of a new array, I need to grab what we have right here and put it inside the cooks list. But again, we just need to do it in a special way. Cooks list, and I need to select the sections. I need to do shift, just like this, and I need to trim it just to remove that white space. And then what I'm going to do equal, and I'm going to do the decode URI. And then I'm going to join again. So I know it is a lot of work, but this is the last thing we're going to do. And I assure you that this is a much better way than using a module or maybe a library just to do something so simple. So now we have a new cooks list. And if I go at the bottom and just do a console log of this, and let me just get rid of that, console log, and I just console log the cooks list, we're going to get them on a much better way. Oh, sorry, I did parts, and it's not parts, it's section. This is my mistake. I have an example right here with a different name. So now we get this object, and notice that we get key and value pairs inside of an object. So later, if we want to loop them in our access them directly, we can, because we have it on an object. Now, what is the problem? We are doing all of this logic right here, and we could keep doing what we need to do inside of this is authenticated. The thing is that later we will need access to this same code. So we could copy this same logic and put it on a different function, or we can put this on a different function so we can call this logic whenever we want. And that's, of course, what we're going to do. It's a little bit more professional. Inside live, I'm going to create a new file, because it's libraries, of course. I'm going to create a utils. So right here in the utils, I'm going to export functions. Right now, it's just going to do one. But this one will hold different functions that we can reuse in our application. So this one is just to get the request from the cookie. So I'm going to say export. I'm going to do export const, and I'm going to call it get cooks from request. All right, so this one is going to be equal to something. And then, of course, we're going to do something else. So this function will get the request that we want to, loop and get the cookies from. And then we're going to get the cook name. All right. And don't worry, you're going to get it in a second why we are passing this argument. So on this one, we pretty much need to do the same thing then here. So I'm just going to copy all of this and I'm going to paste it right here. So we still need the cooks list. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new value, new variable called cook and then value. And for now, this is just going to be an empty variable. We still need to get the request and the cookies from the header and the request. So that, stays the same. This code, we still need to get the values from, the cookies and split it and get it in a more array or actually object way. But then what we want to do, we want to return a cookie, a single cookie. So later, what we can do from maybe from here, I'm just going to delete this. We can make a reference to that function and say, dude, I only want to get on a variable this value, something like this. I don't know, something like this. So now J will get just the cookie we want, just that value. That's why we are passing the cook name, because we are passing the name of what we want to get. So, okay, so I'm going to go back here and I'm going to delete this. So at the end of the day, we just need to return a single cookie. So I'm going to do an if and an else, and you're going to see why in a minute. All right. So first, of course, this function will get a name of the cookie we want to return. What happens if that name does not exist on the list of cookies? This is going to break. That's why we are doing an if else. First, we're going to make sure that the cook value is equal to the cook name. To the cook list. Just like this. And I'm going to use template strings. And I'm going to match it with the cook name that we are getting. All right. It looks nice. Okay, so now what are we going to do? We're going to do return, just like this. We're going to return the cook value. So let me just go and say cook value. All right, and then, of course, we're going to return, just like this. And we're going to return undefined if we, of course, we get no information about this. So, okay, let's put it to a test. I'm going to go right here. And of course, we're going to do it together. I'm going to delete this and I'm going to start again. I'm going to copy the one at the top and I'm going to paste it. Of course, we need to change the logic because now we don't get it from cookies anymore. We need to get it from this function we have right here. So I'm going to go at the top and of course include the import the function. So let me change this. Import and with an M, of course. Sorry for that. And of course, I'm going to use a little bit of destructuring and we're going to get it from /live utils, and that's it. So now, of course, I'm going to make a reference instead of cookies. I'm going to make a reference to the function we just created. And, we want to pass the request as a first argument and then, what we want to get. So we want to get the expiration time, right? And then we do pretty much the same thing. We just need to match if that expiration time, it's the correct one. Just to make sure we are getting the correct values, I'm going to do console log and I'm going to do console log of the expire at. I'm going to reload it and, we get the expired at and at the end we get user true. So when we trigger this function, we are going right here, accessing the headers, splitting everything, and right here we are saying that we are accessing the list and matching it with the cook name. And if that exists, of course, we assign it to cook value. So at the end of the day, what it returns right here on this one is going to be the cook value, which is the expiration time. Of course, if I pass it something that does not exist right here, we should be getting undefined. I'm going to reload it and we get undefined. And it's because if there is no match on the name, we get undefined. Of course, this is not what we want to do. We want to get it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to save it. And now what we need to do, we need to check if this works in real life. So I'm going to reload the application and just right from the start, we get user auth and true. And we know that that is true because we are logged in. And of course, we get it right here as well. So good, man. So now everything works from the start. Doesn't matter if I'm changing or I'm reloading, we always get it from the start. Let me reload again. Okay. So very cool. Okay, so we know that we can pass some props to any component we want. We get the underscore app.js, and we know that if we pass the props to the actual component, to this component, this one will be whatever prompts we put here. These prompts are gonna pass to whatever component we have right here. In this case, if I go to the index, and remember we were doing console log this props, we reload the application and we are getting the prop user auth because we are passing it from the underscore app. Now my question is, what happens if we wanted to pass the user auth prop, just to know if the user is authenticated or not, to the actual header? Right now, we don't have any reference to that. The only thing we are doing right here on the underscore app is just making a reference to the component. But the header, it's part of the main layout. It's not inside pages. So we don't have a direct connection. So we cannot just directly pass the props to the header. So, the only reference we get to the main layout, it's on each component. If I go to index, we get main layout. If I go to contact, we get main layout. So this is the only connection we get with the header. So, if I wanted to, for example, and this is what we want to do, we want to show the login if the user is not authenticated, and we want to hide the logout. And then, of course, we want to do the opposite if the user is not authenticated. We want to show the login, hide the logout. That's the idea. But of course, we need to make that the connection because we need to access to the header. Let me open the header. And we need to get some props and something else and ask, is the user authenticated? Yes. Okay. So do not show this one. Okay. So we get pretty much two ways to do it. And it depends on, how you set up your project. If I go to, for example, the index.js, I'm going to close this one for now. I'm going to open in a minute. So if we go to the app underscore, we know that we are passing the user auth to whatever component. Okay, so I'm going to go to index.js. I'm going to enter here, and we know that we are getting the props. We are getting it right here. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the main layout since it's this is the only reference we get, and I'm going to say user, and then I'm just going to create a prop and pass the value we want to pass, which is this .props.user, and then auth. So now the main layout, I'm going to go to the main layout, of course, is receiving some props, and inside we get that user auth prop. And since we get a reference to this component, you just pass the prop to the header. Really simple. You're just, passing props. So we could only pass the user auth, but again, in the future, you might have a lot of information, maybe many props, not just the user prop, the user auth. So instead of just doing, just passing the user prop, I'm going to do ... and pass whatever prop we get. So now the header will receive some props, including the user auth, of course. So if I go to the header, and right now we have a functional component, I'm gonna change it. You don't need to do this. I'm gonna change this just to preview that we get the correct information here. Let me make this a little bit better. You don't need to do it, okay? Then I'm gonna just go back to this situation, this functional component. So I'm just gonna return. I'm gonna render, and of course, I'm gonna return something, and we return whatever we have right here. And again, don't worry, I'm gonna change it in a second. And of course, since we have a class-based component now, we need to extend, and then component. All right, extends component. And of course, I need to bring component at the top. And again, remember, you don't need to do this. I'm just gonna show you. So component, right. So, okay, so now, of course, if I go right here at the top, or maybe actually in the render, I'm gonna do the console log this.props and see what we get. So console log, and then this.props, right. So if I save it, I'm gonna save it again. Notice that on header, we are getting the children's that, of course, are getting passed by the actual component, but we also get the user auth, right, really cool. So now, of course, we can grab the props from here and do whatever logic we want to do, right? This is the what we've been trying to do. So I'm going to leave this just like it is, and I'm going to show you a different way to do it because we have a problem with this. So if I go to the index.js, we know that we are passing the user auth to the main layout. Now, this is going to work only on the index. Yeah, it's only going to work with the index because we are just passing it right here. Notice that when we render the index, the header, it's part of the index, and if we go to a different component, that new header is going to get rendered again. So, what is the point? The thing is that if we use it this way, we need to be passing the user auth on each component. We need to go to the contact, doing it again. If we go to the login success or the about, we need to go and do it again. So, it just makes no sense. It's a lot of typing just to do something very simple. And of course, we have another way to do it. Now, the other way, and we will need to change this a little bit, just the way it works. So if you remember, we are using the underscore app.js, and this is kind of the main component. Everything starts right here. So instead of just rendering the component, since all our routes will have the same header, why not just to put or to wrap or to include the main component, the main layout, just here, Instead of doing it on each component, we just do it once, and that's it. Told you that this was going to change. If you remember, just told you previously that we can change this. So we're going to do it right here. I'm going to go at the top, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to import main layout. So yeah, layout. There we go. And it's going to be from / components layouts, and then main layout. Right. Let me do it again. Main layout. Right. So now, of course, I'm going to go copy the main layout, and I'm going to wrap all the components we are going to be rendering, and I'm going to put this right here. All right. So now, of course, if I reload the page, we get two headers, right? And that's, the way it works. We know that this is going to work this way because we are rendering, again, two headers. One inside here and the other one inside here. So now, for example, if I just delete this and leave the content, we're going to get what we want. So I'm going to go save it, going to reload the application, and now the index shows the header, but the header is getting rendered from within the app.js. So of course, what we need to do now is we need to fix all the other components. We're going to do it in a couple minutes. For now, I'm just going to apply the same logic. I'm going to go to main layout, and I'm still passing the user auth to the main layout component because we kind of need it. So if I do it and I reload the page, notice that from the header, we are still getting the user auth with everything else. So, this still works. All right, so now what we need to do? We need to do two things. We need to go to the header, fix this so we can display the login if the user is not authenticated, and of course do the opposite with the other one. And we need to fix all the other components. If you want to try it at home on your own, that's cool by me. So I'm going to go to the header, and I'm going to turn this to the same component we've been using. I'm going to use a const. I'm just going to go back to the functional component. If you made it a class, that's fine. You can still use a class. Doesn't matter. So I'm going to just return some JSX. We don't need all of this nonsense. I'm going to go at the bottom, and of course we need to delete all of this, and I just need to render a functional component. That's it. All right. If I reload it, it still works. Now, of course, on the header now, we are getting some props. So I'm going to say props. And I'm going to go right here at the bottom. And I'm going to start some, pretty simple logic. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to open and say if props, dot, I'm going to access the user auth. We're going to do something. If not, we're going to do something else. So remember that this one is a Boolean. It could be true, could be false. So if the props user auth it's equal to true, it means that the user is logged in. So what we're going to do, we're going to show the log out. So I'm going to copy paste and just remove this one. And then make it a little bit, better because it's really ugly. And all right, there we go. So now I'm going to do this one. I'm just going to copy and I'm going to paste because if it's the opposite case, of course, we need to show something else. All right, so very cool. So, looks nice. We get it. We're getting an error. We are compiling. Everything is good. So now, of course, if I reload the application, we get just the log out because we are indeed logged in. So if I do log out, we just are getting logged out, and that works. If we try and log in again, of course, we will need to log in again. So it was steve@gmail.com. and it was testing 123, if I remember correctly. And I made a mistake. Steve.gmail.com. It was testing. Maybe it was testing or password 123. I kind of don't remember. Let me just double check. Okay, sorry for that. It was testing 123 with an upper T. But that's okay. After I log in, we are getting in, and of course remember that this one we will remove this one, but the one we care is the one at the top. We are now getting the log out because we are getting the logged in. Very, very, very cool stuff. So I'm gonna fix the other ones because I don't like it, how it looks. I'm gonna go here and we're gonna start. I don't need the header anymore. I don't need the main layout anymore. The index, that's cool. And I'm gonna go to the other ones. I'm gonna go in order. First, I'm gonna go to the about. I'm gonna remove the main layout right here, and I'm gonna delete this one because we don't need it. I'm gonna go at the top and remove the main layout because you should always remove the imports that you're not using. It's 101. So I'm gonna save it. All right. So there we go. I'm gonna go to the index. That was done. Now I'm gonna remove the main layout. And okay, looks nice. And I'm going to delete the console log. Login success, main layout. We don't want it anymore. I'm gonna go here, go here. Oh, of course we don't have a fragment, so I'm gonna just leave it like that. All right. What else? We get the users. I'm gonna go to index. Gonna delete this one and the main layout as well. Make it a little bit better. And of course, when this section is done, I'm gonna of course behind the scenes, not recording, of course. I'm gonna adjust the positions and everything else. If you want to do it, that's okay. If not, doesn't matter. So I'm gonna delete the main layout, and we are pretty much done. So delete this, delete this. Oh, of course we don't have fragments, so I'm gonna do it as well, and we are pretty much done. So now, of course, we just get the logout and everything else. If I go to users, we get users, about us, very good. Then contact. And of course, we get the error with home that it's not really working. I need to find a solution. Of course, I will tell you later. But everything looks nice, man. Really works. So now in the next section, we're gonna talk about something else. For example, right now we're getting if the user is authenticated or not. That works. But most of the times in your applications, you will need to go to maybe a section. In this case, I don't know, users, and this user section only shows if the user is authenticated. So we are going to create an HOC to check if the user is authenticated. So if it is, of course, we can let the user pass. If not, we're going to kick the user out, or we're going to show a message or something like that. So we are going to talk about preventing routes. So let's go to the next one and start with that section. Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk about preventing routes. So the usual way of protecting routes with React, it's creating a high order component. That component will check if the user is authenticated or not, and it will return the component, or it's gonna, do something else like a redirection, or maybe return a different component that says that the user is not authenticated or something like that. Or maybe just go back to the login. Depends on your application. So that's the way we do it with React to protect routes. And that's, how we will do it. So maybe you have a background already with React, working with React. So, we're going to pass the props to an HOC. The HOC will return something. So if you have some background and you want to try it on your own, you can totally do it. This is the same idea. We just run an HOC and that's it. So if you don't have the experience, of course, don't worry. We're going to do it together. And of course, I'm going to go slow on this one because it's a little bit confusing. Okay, so we're going to begin. So I'm going to use the users component as a restricted route. If you're not logged in, we shouldn't be able to see users right here. We cannot enter users. Okay, so first I'm going to go to components, and we need to create a place where we're going to be putting the HOC. So you can put it on includes or whatever. I'm just going to create a new directory called HOC, and I'm going to create a new file called auth route. You can call this whatever you want. So auth route.js. And we're going to, of course, make it better in a minute. So I'm going to go to the includes of the header. I'm going to make this a little bit better because I don't want to show the user's button if the user is not authenticated. So I'm going to just take care of this right now. I'm going to go to props. I'm going to go to user auth, and we are doing pretty much the same logic than here. So if the user is authenticated, I want to show it. If not, I don't want to show it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to, put it here. And of course, if the user is not authenticated, I don't want to show anything. That's it. Since we are authenticated, we are getting the button. Very cool. Okay, so I'm going to go to the auth route, and this is going to be our, our HOC, high order component. So a high order component, it's a function that returns a component that returns a component. Yeah, that function returns a component that returns a component. I know it's a little bit weird, but don't worry, you're going to get it. So on this component, of course, we will be working with some JSX because we are working with React. So right from the start, we need to import React from React. Very cool. All right, that's done. Okay, so what's next? Again, it's a function that returns a component that returns a component. So right from the start, I just need to return, I need to create a function. So export, and of course I'm going to make it default. Export default. I'm going to create a function. All right, that's it. Now this function will get a component as an argument. And don't worry, we're going to go back to this, this argument. All right. So this function returns a component. So we just need to return something. We need to return a component. So I'm going to return a class called auth route. You can call again this whatever you want. And of course, we need to do the extends. And I'm going to do React and then component. And you're going to see in a minute why I'm doing this. So I'm doing render, open and close. And this one will return something. All right. So again, this is a function that returns a component that returns a component. So right from the start, we are just returning that component, right? Okay. So of course we created a function, and the function receives an argument that calls component. And this is why I'm doing React.component, and I'm not importing component right here at the top, like we did previously, because this auth route extends the React component. If I just say component right here, this is going to think that I want to use this one right here. That's why we need to do it with React.component and not just component. If you rename the argument, of course you can do that. But in this case, it doesn't work. Okay, so that's cool. Now we have our HOC. We are getting a function that returns a class that returns a component. So now how can we use this HOC? So in this case, we want to use it on users. So I'm going to go to the index of users. And again, you can use it whatever you want. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to start, bringing things. I'm going to import that HOC. So import, and I'm going to say auth and then route. And it's going to be from, it's of course that / one more time, and components and HOC and auth route. Cool. Okay. So we are getting this class that renders, whatever. We are not really doing anything. Of course, if I just save the application and go to users, nothing really happens. So we're going to use this HOC as a filter. Right now, if we access to this component, we are still rendering the users. So to use an HOC, what we need to do is, instead of rendering this component, is to render the HOC first. So if I do something like this, nothing is going to really happen. We're going to get an error. Okay. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to be passing as an argument to this HOC the component we want to render. So if I go to the application, we get, the component. So what is happening? So when we go to this route, Next knows that it needs to render whatever logic we have right here. But now we are using an HOC, and we use it kind of like filter. So the application, when it reaches this section, it's going to say, oh, okay, so what I need to do is not to render this component directly. What I need to do is to render this component, which is the HOC we have right here. So the application will go to the HOC, and it knows that we are passing this as an argument. We are passing this component as an argument. So it's going to go here, and it's going to say, oh, okay, so I have a function, and I'm getting the user's component as an argument. So what I'm going to do, instead of returning just this one alone, I'm going to return this component, this class. And what happens is that this class, it's rendering the component that we are passing as an argument. So at the very end, what we are doing is rendering this component that shows the component we get as an argument, which is, the user's component. And of course, we pretty much get the same thing. We get the same thing. So what is the, what is the catch? What is the importance of doing this? Because at the end, we are still rendering the same view, the same image, while, doing all of this. The thing is that when we pass it to the HOC, we pass the component, we are passing all the props as well. And if you remember, on the app_app, we are passing the user auth props. So the user component, this one, gets the user auth true or false in the props. So we do have access to those props right here. So for example, if I go to the render HOC and I do console log and do this props, we're going to get the user auth. So we know that we are authenticated. So we get it. We get it from the HOC. So now what we could do, we could check, we can ask if this prompt is true. And if it's true, we let the user, load this component. And if it's not, if it's false, of course, we're going to show something else. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to create a dumb function. I'm going to call it render page. And of course, this is going to be just a function that returns some JSX. And this one, the only thing it's going to do is going to check if this.props user auth, it's true. So if it's true, we're going to do something. What are we going to do? Well, what I want to do, I want to show the actual component. That's what I want to do. And if not, I'm just going to show a string that says unauthorized, whatever, doesn't matter. Okay. So now instead of just, rendering the component directly here, it's going to go through this function that will evaluate if the user is authenticated or not. And at the very end, the only thing we do, we just, render that component. So this render page, and that's it. So now, of course, since we are authenticated, we are getting the component because it's true, and we get this. So again, this HOC, it's acting like a filter. And right now we are doing something very simple, We are just checking the props that are coming from _app, right? Very simple. Now what you could do, you could take a much complicated approach like doing this. You could go to the auth service, use the isAuthenticated, and check if the user is authenticated again. Since we are already doing it on the app, it just makes no sense that we do it again. But if you want to do it, like that, you could, repeat this process on the HOC. All right, that's cool. I'm going to go and do a log out just to make sure that everything works. I'm going to log out. And if I want to go to users, of course, we get unauthorized. So, that works. All right, man. So I'm going to log in again because we need to be logged in to do something else. So gmail.com. I'm going to show you a different way. It was testing 1, 2, 3. All right, so cool. So if we go to users, we get it and we get the component. So, that works. So, okay. So now, of course, okay, I'm getting a call. I'm going to pause the video and be right back. This dude, I don't know who is on the phone. It's been calling all day, so I'm going to take it. Okay, man, so sorry for that. It was from the bank. They wanted to offer me a package. They called me like 11 times today. Of course, I didn't agree, but I had to take the call. And this is the way I like to do courses, because I'm a real person. I'm teaching you real things. And again, I'm just a real person. I don't have a script. Of course, I have a script right here, but I don't read it just word for word. I have, tiny topics I need to teach just as a reminder, because I want to show myself on my videos as a real person, right? There I get real calls. Sometimes you get a dog barking in the background. And again, I'm real. I don't like to record a video, reading word by word from the script, or maybe putting a Google Translate. That sucks, man. That sucks. I just hate when that happens. Okay, again, sorry for that. Let's go back to topic. So, okay, so now we know that this works, right? We know it works. Now there's one very specific scenario that some things are not going to work. What happens if I wanted to use initial props? All right, so let's give it a try. I'm going to show you by example. I'm going to go here and say I want to create a static, and then I want to do get initial and then props. Simple as that. And then I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to say that I got a variable called user that has the Francis. So at the end of the day, of course, on the get initial props, we know that we need to return something. And in this case, I'm just going to return the user. So now if I go to the console log and do this .props, we know that the get initial props will inject whatever we are returning right here, and we have access to it with the this.props. We have access through props. So if I go to the application, we get an empty object. So we don't have a Francis. Now, if I remove the HOC and reload the application again, we get the user auth and we get the user Francis. So we know that works. So what is the problem? So maybe you know, maybe you don't. But what it happens right here is that when we let the application know that we want to render the user's component, this one, what it's really kicking in is the auth, the HOC, not the users. So the only one kicking in right here for the first time is the auth, is the HOC. And then the HOC returns the component. Since the user's component, it's not the component that kicks in on the first render, we don't have access to initial props. We cannot use them right here. We don't have access because the only one that has access, because it's the first one to render, is the HOC, the auth route. Of course, we have a way to fix it. What we can do, we can go to the auth route and we could create all that logic and inject the props on this component. So what we pretty much need to do, we need to do what _app it's doing. We get the initial props and then we inject the props. So we need to do something like this. So this video went too long, so let's go to the next one and try to fix or maybe change the auth route so we can have access to, get initial props. Okay, so what we want to do now is to have access to this value on this, actual component. Since now we know that the one kicking in is the auth route and not this component, we do not get a direct access to get initial props. We need to do it from here and then pass the props to the component, just like we are doing with the _app.js. So we need to mimic the _app. So we're going to start doing that. So I'm going to go to this component and I'm going to say, okay, so I want to bring the static async and then get initial, and then props. And let me do it correctly. If you do this wrong, nothing's going to work. So get initial props, open and close, and open and close. So on the _app.js, we know that we are bringing component and we are bringing the context. So in this case, I'm just going to bring pretty much everything, all the context. So, okay. So at the end of the day, what we will get is some page props, some properties and values from within this component, from this component. I'm just going to create a variable where I can store everything. So I'm going to say page props. And this one, it starts as an empty value, an empty object. So then what I need to do, I need to ask if the child component, which is this component, the user component, has initial props. So we can get the values from there. So we do just a simple if. And we do, okay, if component dot get initial props exists, then we're going to go to the page props and we're going to set it equal to something. Equal to what? Well, we're going to do await, since we are using async await. We're going to enter the actual component, not the comment, the component. And we're going to say, okay, I want to get the initial props and bring the context. So what I'm doing, I'm storing inside page props whatever we get back from get initial props from this component. So at the end of the day, this page props is going to be equal to whatever we get from this one. All right, so I'm going to do just that. Remember that we always need to return something. So if I do ... page props, we are returning the page props from here, and we can use it from within here. Now, of course, you can still access the context of this one. So you can do something like that. So console.log, we do ctx, and if I reload the application, we can actually see it right here at the bottom. Let me just scroll all the way down. So we do have access, and this is the context of this component. Now what we are doing here is we are grabbing the context and everything else from this component, and we are storing it on page props. So now, since we have all the data we want from the child component, from this component, the context of this one, we can pass it as props on this one. So notice that if I reload the application, we are getting an empty object. And it's because this doesn't work, right? What it's really, where it's really happening is that we start something right here. It's going to be passed to here, and this one is going to pass it to here. So if I do, of course, if I pass the props, I'm going to do component. Let me just go here. I'm going to open and close, and I say that I want to put that props, which is equal to whatever we get here on the page props. And of course, it's this.props. And if I reload the application, we know that we get the user auth that we get from the app, right? And we get the user Francis that we get from this get initial props. So again, we are just catching all the information that comes from the app, all the information that comes from here. We are kind of merging everything on a single value, and then we are passing it as props. That's why, we have access on the direct access on this component. So again, we are just mimicking the underscore app.js because it's a high order component. Now what you get as well is that you can access to the this.props on the actual HOC. I can go right here and say console log and say this.props, something like that. And if I reload the information, we are getting the exact same thing, but this one happens on the auth route, on the HOC directly. It's happening right here. So if we do have access from here, from the HOC, we can do whatever we want. We can test the user. We can try to validate the user authentication again, just like we are doing right here. And let's give it a try. I'm gonna go at the top, and I'm gonna import the auth service, and I'm just gonna copy from here. We're gonna import the auth service, and this one comes from actually ... There we go. So from the app out. So I'm going to try to do pretty much the same thing we are doing right here, but on this HOC. So I'm kind of revalidating the user again. So I'm going to create a different variable called really auth. Doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter. You can use whatever you want. And on this one, what I'm going to do really auth equals, and we are kind of do all of this again. So I'm going to copy all of this, and I'm going to paste it again. So we are making a request, and again, we are asking to the auth service if the user is authenticated, and we are still, again, passing the request. So this one will return if the true or false, saying that the user is authenticated, even though we are already getting it from the app.js. So now we have a different property saying really auth. So if I reload the application, we are getting it again, right? We are pretty much revalidating the user again. And we are doing it on the HOC, right? There's no need to do it right here. Because, of course, the HOC is the main component that kicks in. There's no point of doing all of this right here because we use the HOC to prevent the user from loading any of this. If this goes wrong, none of this is going to happen. So, any logic you get right here, not going to really work. Okay, different ways of doing things. And of course, on the practice project, we're going to redo all of this logic because we need to prevent routes, of course. Okay, so let's go to the next section. We're going to change a little bit of this logic. We're going to make a better authentication.